Welcome, everybody, to another QB Power Hour. We're really glad to have you joining us today. Today's topic is building custom reports in QuickBooks. Glad to have you joining us. A real quick agenda. We're going to be talking just a little bit about QB Power Hour, a little bit about the hosts and guests, the CPE process. We have a couple of announcements and updates. And our topics today is custom reporting in QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop. Hector is going to be taking you through QuickBooks Desktop. Then I'll be talking about some custom reports in QuickBooks Online. My name is Michelle Long. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a CPA with an MBA in entrepreneurship located in Kansas City, Missouri. I've had my own practice long for success for many years now, over 20. Author of many Intuit Academy courses, co-author of the advanced certifications for both QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online, as well as 5 books that I've written that are available on Amazon. Love to have you check those out. LinkedIn group, love to have you join us there if you're not. And again, I'm thrilled to be an international speaker for Intuit, traveling around the world helping accountants and bookkeepers learn about QuickBooks. And before I let Hector introduce himself, I wanted to give a little shout out to our own Hector Garcia, because he is quite the man these days. Not only was he recognized as one of 40 under 40, so by Accounting Today, or the CPA Practice Advisor. Which one is it now, Hector?
CPA Practice
Advisor?
CPA Practice
Okay,
Advisor.
so the CPA Practice Advisors 40 under 40 as being a very outstanding accounting professional. So congratulations on that, Hector. And that's not all. There's more. There's also the Firm of the Future contest that Intuit is running. Hector has been named one of the top 20 finalists for the Firm of the Future contest. So I can't wait at QuickBooks Connect. Hopefully, Hector, you will be the #1 winner, but it's quite an honor just to be recognized as in the top 20 there. So congratulations on both of those, Hector. That's fabulous.
Thanks. I don't know about the #1 winner, but I think top 20 is good enough recognition. I love that. Anyway, so I live and work in Miami, Florida. I teach QuickBooks in my own classroom. I have a master's in finance and taxation, and somehow focus all my time on teaching people how to use QuickBooks locally and over the web with many channels, QB Power Hour, YouTube, stuff like that. Okay, so about the QB Power Hour, next webinar is actually September 24th. I think Michelle forgot to update that slide there. So the 24th next week is going to be the next webinar. Typically, we are running every 2 weeks, but this couple of months have just been crazy in terms of new content and so many different things. So we're doing a bit of a weekly run here. So we will have another Power Hour next week, which will be a special episode with Spotlight reporting. We have a slide all the way at the end, and typically we split our time between 50% QuickBooks Desktop, 50% QuickBooks Online, and from time to time we'll have a third-party app. Like next week we'll have Spotlight reporting or practice management guest speaker, like we've had Doug Sleater and Ron Baker in the past, which are fabulous speakers. And then if you go to qbpowerhour.com, you can suggest some topics. That way we'll know what's hot and trending for the next couple webinars.
Sure, yeah, I'll go ahead and talk about this one. We'd love to have you guys join us at QuickBooks Connect. As I mentioned earlier, they're going to be announcing the winner of the Firm of the Future, but they also, we've mentioned this several times, the keynote speakers that they have are just amazing. I know they got some great ones lined up again this year. Both Hector and I will be presenting at QB Connect, and the Goo Dolls are going to be there this year. So it's a fabulous conference. If there's any way you can attend, I highly recommend it. For those of you that are wanting to get the advanced certification for QuickBooks Online, this is an opportunity for you to get the live training at QuickBooks Connect. So I encourage you, if there's any chance that you can go, great conference, as well as FleeterCon that's coming up in Las Vegas. That's always a fabulous conference as well. Doug does a great job of pulling together lots of information and third parties from the whole industry. Hector and I will be doing QB Power Hour live there from Las Vegas. So we'd love to have you join us there. And we're going to be coming around on the road show, if you will. The QBO Cert Prep Training is a road show that's going around to various cities throughout the next couple of months, all the way through January. And Hector and I, it's going to be a lot of fun. He and I are presenting together in Long Island, New York, Syracuse, as well as Jacksonville, Orlando, and Miami. So if you're in one of those cities, make sure you register. And then I'm also going to be presenting in Charlotte, Atlanta, Nashville, and I get the privilege of going to Honolulu. Yay! So those of you in Hawaii, I'd love to see you over there. You can check out all the cities and dates because these are just a few of the cities. There's lots of other trainers that are going to other cities as well. But if you want to write down that bit.ly link, 2015 QBO Cert Prep, all lowercase, you can see a list of all the cities, all the dates, and you can register there. And we'd love to see you in some of those cities. And if you guys are in the ones that Hector and I are in, or one I'm in, make sure you say hi, and let's get a picture that we can post on the QB Power Hour Facebook group, and that would be lots of great fun there. So love to see you guys at some of those. So join us for that if you can. And I'm going to go ahead and let Hector take it away for some of the intro and the QuickBooks Desktop, and I'm going to mute myself. So Hector, we can see your screen now. Take it away.
Thank you. So I wanted to do an episode on custom reports for a very long time. We're just waiting for the right timing, and I'm glad that it is now. So we're going to talk about, before I jump to the product, I want to talk about some of the theory stuff, just because it's important to know that there is kind of a little bit of a science behind understanding how QuickBooks reports work. So the first couple of things is there are 4 types of reports in QuickBooks, and I'm kind of focused on QuickBooks Desktop. I know the slide says QuickBooks Desktop and Online, so I'm going to focus on QuickBooks Desktop for now because Online has some different nuances here. But in QuickBooks Desktop, there's going to be 4 types of reports. There's going to be a summary report, which does not contain any transaction information. It contains the total of all the transactions, summing to that amount based on the filters that we're using. Then there's the detail report, and a detail report is going to be something like a open bill report, open invoice, something that contains actual line items. Then there's list reports. List reports do not contain transactions. They only contain vendor names, customer names, item names, account names. And then there's the special reports. Some of them can be filtered, some of them can't. That's why we call them special reports, because they have specific purposes and we really can't tweak them so much. So something like an AR aging, estimate versus actual, stock inventory status, that would be considered a special report. So let me talk about the number 1 tip that I give all my students for the QuickBooks classes that I teach when we teach the reporting class. So before you build a summary report, the first thing I recommend is try to see if you can draw the report on a piece of paper first. I would say that's like the most important thing. Can you draw the report? Can you visualize in terms of what's going to be in the columns, what's going to be in the rows, and what specific data you want to see inside of the content? For example, for a report where you see months as the columns, that's one of your options. You're going to go to columns, month. And then when you see vendors on the rows, that's going to be one of your options. You're going to select rows vendors. Now, the specific data, if I only want to see cost of goods sold, that would be the filter that I want to use. So let me jump into the product real quick and talk about that specific example. So again, I want to have columns as months as the columns, total cost of goods sold as the actual body, the content, and I want vendors as the rows. So let me start by clicking on reports and then going down to custom reports and then clicking on summary. Okay, so that's kind of the first step to build a custom report. And then after I've drawn it and visualized it and I kind of know what I want, then I want to use all these components to build the report. So let's say I only want to see paid expenses. So I want to make sure that if I'm going to go with paid expenses, I'm going to select a cash report. That's kind of like the number 1 rule, because if I want to see paid, I'm going to switch to cash. Display columns by, this is where I will select month. And then display rows by, this is where I select vendor, right? Because I'm trying to see my total cost of goods sold by vendor by month. Then under date, I want to see this fiscal year. And then under filter, and this is kind of the key element here, under filter, I want to go to account. And remember, I only want to see cost of goods sold because I'm only looking for direct expenses. So I'm going to select this filter here called cost of sales. And then I'm going to hit OK. And then that would be the report that I was looking for. I'm looking for the vendor on the rows. I want to see the months on the columns, and I'm only looking for cost of goods sold. Now, something that's interesting about building a custom report, let me go to the next slide here. I find it to be so that was my number one tip, draw it first. My number two tip, my second tip is spend a good amount of time thinking about the title. uh, I can't stress this enough, how much of a time waster it is for you to build a great custom report that achieves everything you're trying to achieve, and you do a real crummy job coming up with the title, because then you print it and the user of the report just has no clue what they're looking at. So based on the report that we just built, the suggested title I would use would be paid direct expenses by vendor by month. Now, why? Because the title itself contains or suggests all the filters that we're using and all the settings that we're using. So that is the number one tip I would say. Make sure that whatever name you give it, the whole name evokes all the filters that you're using. So before I save this report or before I print it, I'm gonna click here where it says memorize, and then I'm gonna give this the name. So this is gonna be, in this case, would be paid direct expenses. And again, direct expenses and cost of goods sold can be used interchangeably, by month, by vendor, something like that. Now, actually, I want to flip this and I'm going to say by vendor, by month. I like to put the time period at the end. Let me hit OK. And the reason why I do that is I'm going to hit refresh, is because if I want to see this by quarter, and I switch this to by quarter, and then I go memorize this report again, when I click on new, I can just quickly change the name towards the end here. So by quarter. So that is sort of my number one and number two tip. Draw it out first and then spend a good amount of time coming up with the title. I can't stress enough how important these components are. Okay, let's go to my next tip and custom report, where we can talk about these theories that we have in place. So rows and columns will provide grouping like month, customer, class, vendor. We just did that. Now the key thing is I cannot have the same grouping type for both rows and columns. So that's a really important, really important a piece to know. When you draw out a report, you kind of have to know that it is not possible for you to have, for example, vendor here and then have customer here. QuickBooks doesn't allow you. Vendors and customers are both names. Because they're both names, if I hit OK, I cannot build a report like this. That's an important piece. Just like if I try to do employee or something like that. So I cannot cross a row with a name and a column with a different name. Now, I can't cross account, for example. So I can go vendor and account list. That I can do, because this account list has to do with the chart of accounts. So balance sheet, summary, income statement, and account list, these four are the same group. It just means report, or it means account. And then customer name, type, vendor type, employee, these are all considered to be the same group. So just kind of be careful when using those. Okay, I want to use a different example on custom reports, where we use units, where we use quantity as a unit of measure. So let's go back to custom reports and let's do a summary. And then I want to see the number of products. I'm going to focus on just inventory products, for example, that I've sold during a particular period of time. So I'm going to select here this fiscal year. And then under columns, we'll do this quarterly. Under rows, I'm going to go ahead and select item detail. By the way, item detail, it just basically means item. And instead of showing the amount, I'm going to go ahead and show the quantity. That's what that filter does, the quantity. And then I'm going to click on filters, and I'm going to go down to item, and I'm going to select only inventory. So I'm just kind of focused on inventory items. And then I want to just go back to this account filter here, and I only want to see when the inventory items were sold. So I'm not really focused about when the inventory items were purchased or bought or something like that. So I'm going to just click on income as the category there. So just focus on income. So when I hit OK, then what do I get? And then I may be missing something in a filter here, so we're going to check that in a second. so what happens here is I get a report with the units, and I'm missing a filter here, which we're going to do in a second. And the reason why this filter is not working is because if I double click on any of these, I'm actually, well, let me look for one that actually has, I'm actually seeing both the sort of the debit and the credit side of it. So I want to make sure that when I go back into that filter, that I pick the correct filter. Let me pick just all income, all ordinary income. That one should work. Let me hit OK. Oh, there it is. Okay. So once I hit all ordinary income, and that was kind of the issue there, I didn't have the right filter. So if I'm looking just for sales, I'm going to look for all ordinary income. By the way, these are negatives because these are credits, right? Because income are credits. That doesn't mean I sold -4. That actually means I sold 4. So basically, this gives you a good idea. And if I hit collapse, I hide all the sub accounts in this case, or the sub items, so I can open them. So this is a good, interesting piece of reporting where I can see only units. Now, if I go to back into customize report and select both, in this case, and I hit OK, and let me just expand that again because I have sub items, I'm going to see the total sale amount, and I'm also going to see the total quantity. And don't pay attention to the negatives. That doesn't mean that they've been returned or anything like that. It just means that that's showing in terms of a credit. So that's really how you use quantity and amounts on custom reports. The other important piece is the filters. Right? The filters are what are going to narrow down the data. Now, in QuickBooks Online, the terminology they use is lists. So just kind of keep in mind that it doesn't really use the filter. It uses the word list, but it's kind of used interchangeably. And then the other important piece is the subcolumns. Okay, these subcolumns, sometimes they are misinterpreted. So I want to kind of talk about how these subcolumns work. So I'm going to pull a report. In this case, I'm going to do a sales report by customer. Okay. And then basically these are all my sales. And I'm going to go ahead and select as my date range, I'm going to select last month. So right now, let me collapse this for a second. So right now I'm looking at total sales by customer. And just so you know, the construction of this report, only invoices and sales receipts show here. So if you have any deposits going into the bank pointing to the customer, they don't show on this report. Anyway, when I click on custom report, I have a couple of different things here. I have previous period, I have previous year, and I have year to date. And I kind of want to walk through what all these are. Now, at any point in time that you do previous period is going to go backwards the same amount of time as your date range. So naturally, if I'm looking at last month, which is all of the month of November for the sample file, previous period is going to be October. And then if I do previous year, it's basically going to take the exact date range and just change the year. So in this case, it will show 2018. And then year to date will always take the fiscal year all the way through January through the end of the period. So that's the difference between previous period, previous month, and year to date. Now I'm going to go ahead and click customized report here and kind of show you in contrast. Let me take away year to date. And then instead of choosing last month, I'm going to choose a random date range. So I'm going to choose September 1st to September 10th, right? So I'll do September 1st to September 10th and just kind of illustrate what exactly this does. And there may not be many transactions here, but when I do a previous period and a previous period, okay, it's going to show me, in this case, October 20th to October 21st to October 31st or something like that. So it's going to go back exactly 10 days. And previous year is going to be the exact date range with 2018. So hope with that example, the subcolumns make total sense in that case. Keyword. Okay, so let's go to the next example that I wanted to talk about here is going to be on transaction detail reports. Now, one of the major areas of confusion in a transaction detail report is that columns and rows don't have the same context. So let me go to report and let me go to custom reports and I go to transaction detail report. Now, notice that in a transaction detail report, I don't get the rows and columns drop down like I do with the summary report because there's just much different behavior. In a transaction detail report, a column is talking about content inside of the transaction. And in the case of rows, the rows are actually the transactions are going to be displayed. So rows is not even an option. So let's talk about, for example, an open invoice report. Okay, so in a transaction detail report, when you talk about an open invoice report, filters are going to be a real key component. So I'm going to click here on dates and click all. So if I'm going to pull an open invoice report, for example, I have to make sure that I don't use cash basis. Cash basis will never work because cash basis shows me the payment portion of an invoice. So that won't even work. So I have to make sure that I stick on to accrual. Then I'm going to go to filters here. And if I want open invoices, then I need to make sure that, again, the title, it's an open invoice report. So the title itself should contain the filters. So the word open means paid status. So that's the filter for open, right? So I'm going to leave here open. And then the other filter in this case is the word invoice, open invoice report. So I'm going to look for transaction type, and I'm going to hit the drop down here and click on invoice. Now, if you notice this little search box here, this was introduced back in QuickBooks 2015. So if you're working with an older version, you don't have the search box. You just have to kind of find them in there. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And that is an open invoice report. But in this particular case, I'm seeing both credits and debits. As you can tell here on this side, I'm seeing both credits and debits. So if I were to scroll all the way down, I get this just kind of this weird obscure number here. So maybe in an open invoice report, I don't want to see the details. I want to see just the overall balance of the open invoice. Now, what that basically means is that I am not interested on the splits, or I'm not interested on the targets. I'm interested only on the destination information. So in the cases, for example, this second invoice here, that a la Robert for 14,510, I'm actually not interested on the details on the 3150 or the 9240 or the 16. I'm not interested in that. I just want the overall invoice amount. That way I'm not cluttered with both debits and credits. So that's one of the hardest filters to master. So I'm going to click here on filter, which is the detail level. So I'm going to click on detail level, and this is pretty much everything revolving custom detail reports. It's dependent on what choice you make on this specific filter. This is in my opinion, the most important filter of a transaction detail report, because it determines what side of the transaction you want to see. So in the case of all, for example, I'm going to see both the source and the target, or the source and the split. If I go to summary, I only see the source, or I only see the accounts receivable side of the invoice. And if I click all except summary, then I'm going to see the items or the specific products that I sold. So in the case of an open invoice report, I'm interested in just invoice by invoice. So I'm going to click on summary only and then hit OK. And that is going to narrow it down to all of my invoices. Now, in this particular report, I am not seeing what portion of the invoice is open. As a matter of fact, here on the debit side, this is the original dollar amount of the invoice. So if I wanted to see whatever is open from the invoice itself, and just to kind of illustrate the point here for a second, if I wasn't doing this through a report, if I was going to the customer center, and then I was going into transactions, and then I was going into invoices, and then I was going to click on open invoices, and then I go here to open balance. See, the real open balance is 100, but let me put dates here. I'll put dates all. See, the real balance here is 120,000. If you see on that very last column, that's the actual open balance. 138 is the original invoice amount, right? So what I'm focused in for that specific report I was building, it's the 120,000. So what I need to do is I need to enable that particular column. So let me just get rid of a couple of columns here, just so I can open up some space for that when I do open it up, so there's no surprise. So let me just open this whole thing. There we go. And I'll click on customize report, and then I'm going to go down to balance. Basically, that's what I'm looking. But what I'm looking, it's open balance. So you see that little column there. That's the data point I want to bring in. It's open balance, and I hit OK, and then that will give me the open balance. So at this point, I could choose to just get rid of balance. I could choose to get rid of credit. I can choose to get rid of debit, depending on what I'm trying to achieve, right? And then at this point, I can memorize this report and call this open invoices, open balances only. So notice that I on the report title, open invoices, I'm including my filters, and then in parentheses, I'm sort of adding what information I'm seeing or not seeing. So I'm gonna hit OK there to memorize that report. With again, report titles are so important. Now, a couple of things that I would do here is if I wanted to group this by customer, I would go to total by. Unfortunately, there's only one grouping dimension. I wish there was two at least or more, but this is it, right? So we have one group in dimension. So I'm going to click on total by and then click on customer. And then I'm going to group these by customer or by job. And if I do this, then basically name becomes redundant, right? Because I'm going to see name appear and then name appear again. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of name at that point, right? And then also because I know these are open invoices, I guess type would also be redundant. So I'll get rid of that. So that basically lets me narrow down and see just much more concise information. So at this point, I see all my open invoices grouped by customers, by job, with only the information I'm looking, which is the actual open balance, the invoice number, and the date. So it's kind of a couple of examples of how you can start working with custom transaction detail reports. Okay, now, I want to talk about this concept of source and destination. And I wish I had more time, but I only got like 5 more minutes. So let me talk about the concept of source and destination. This is probably one of the most important pieces of information to know um, about a transaction detail report. So let me go to the next slide here. I think I have a pretty good illustration there. And basically, everything you see highlighted in red is considered to be a source. And by the way, the payee, it's also there. I just didn't put a box in there. So everything you see highlighted on red is it's the source data, and everything you see highlighted in green is the destination data or the split data. As a matter of fact, you can have four names for destination. So just in your mind, the word target, destination, split, or detail, they're all used interchangeably. And the word source and summary, it's both used interchangeably. So to illustrate this example of how source and destination works, and this is going to unravel a lot of mysteries about how reporting works. Let me go ahead and create a check here using that example. I think I already had done it. Oh, yeah, I should have done it. There it is. Okay. So again, as I mentioned earlier, so this vendor name here, that's on the source. The account that it came from, that's the source. The dollar amount of the entire check, that's the source. The class of the check, that's the source. The memo in the top of the check, that's the source. Now down here, the accounts of the split or the detail or the target, whatever name you want to use, this is the destination. So that's the account destination, that's the amount destination, and that's the memo of the destination, the customer of the destination, and the class of the destination. Well, so what do I mean by that? Let me go ahead and pull this report by hitting Control Y, and then I get basically my transaction journal. So on this report that I'm looking at, I'm seeing both the source and the destination. And some of the obvious components here are, for example, under memo and account. So as you can see, the name on the source is Hector. Hector is the vendor that we paid. And the memo is the one that says source memo. And let me just go back to that for a second. Let me put, this is the memo from the source. Okay, and then I'm gonna put here, this is the detail memo. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit save and close so we can see it on that report. And this is exactly what I want to illustrate here. Okay, so you see the memo that comes up is, this is the memo from the source, and then we see the memo of each specific line item, and you can see how they're illustrated with debit and credit, how they're set up with classes, and how they're set up with accounts. So if I was to filter this report, going back into the sample I was using, I'm going to click on customize report, click on filter, and click on detail level. So go back into how important this particular filter is. When I do a detail level, if I do a summary only and I hit OK, I'm only gonna see the source. So I'm gonna see the source vendor name, I'm gonna see the source memo, the source account, and I'm gonna see the source class. And the source dollar amount is a credit because this is a credit to the bank account. Okay. Um, Let me hit on customize report, go to filters, go to detail level, and in this case, let me select all except summary. Okay, so basically it's not gonna show me the source anymore. When I hit OK, I'm only gonna see destination. However, what this is one of the things that drives people insane is that this check wasn't written to customer, it was not written to Renee Bartley, and it was not written to Babcock Music. As a matter of fact, these are the names that we chose to job cost these accounts. However, because this name is part of the line item of the destination, we really don't have much of a choice. That's the name that we get. Now, if you wanted to still show the name that belongs to the from the source transaction, I would have to go into customize report and I have to look for a special column called source name. So if I enable source name and I hit OK, then I get to see the actual vendor name that we paid on the check, although the names of the customers that we job costed to will show on the name column. So that source name is one of the everybody's pet peeves that doesn't show up by default, but it kind of I think it illustrates pretty well how source and destination work on transaction detail report. So you want to think about how this works whenever you are pulling a report with classes. Because if you were, for example, let me go back and look at that check. Okay, so if I look at this check right here, if I look at this check, I know this is an overhead check. Okay, so if I were to naively try to pull this check information in a transaction detail report, in which I were going to use that filter, so I'm going to go to class and choose overhead, and then I was going to go to transaction detail or transaction type, sorry, and choose a check. And then I'll go to date and I'll choose today. So in theory, I should see that check in that type of report. And there it is, it's shown. But if I hadn't uh, double check that when I'm looking at my detail level, if I would have chose all except summary or something for that matter, and I would hit OK, and I would not have gotten any information because the detail of those expenses are hitting different classes. So it's one of the crazy things that happens whenever you have a class on the source and a different class on the destination. So the other reports I want to kind of show you are the difference between a checklist, a check detail list, and a checklist with splits. So let's jump into QuickBooks Desktop here. Okay, and let me escape out of this. So let me go to Reports, Custom Reports, Transaction Detail. Okay, and then here under Dates, I'm going to go ahead and select all because I'm just not paying attention to dates for now. I'm going to click on Filters. Then I'm going to go to Transaction Type and limit this to checks. There we go. And then I'll hit OK. And then based on the different reports here, we're going to talk about checklist, check detail list, and checklist with splits. So the first one, the checklist, would just be this report that we just started, but I'm going to click on customize report, click on filters, and then go to detail level, and then click summary only, and then I hit OK. And that would be a list of checks. That's it. That's a list of checks. Now, in the case of split, for checks that don't have more than one expense account associated with it, you're actually going to see the expense account. But for the ones that don't, you get to see the expense account in there. Either way, I'm just kind of focused on having purely a checklist here. So I'm going to get rid of all these columns, because all I'm trying to do is pull a checklist, and that's it. Okay, so that is an example of a list of checks, right? The other example, the other report that we wanted to pull was a check detail list. Okay, so the difference basically, it started with the same report, is when I go to customize report and click on filter, instead of having a detail level of a summary only, then I would have an all except summary. So then I'm going to click OK. And then in this case, I actually closed the column with a debit. So let me go ahead and turn that back on, because we're actually going to need it at this point. And then this would be a check detail list. That means we don't get the source dollar amount. We get only the destination or the split amount. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on that to show you this check is actually $1,200. But because this is a check detail list, I don't get the 1200. I'm actually going to see check number 93 twice here. See that because there's two lines within the transaction. And then the last one would be a checklist with details. That would be having detail level all, and then I hit OK. And then at that point, I get to see, there you go, there's the 1200, that's the actual check. And then we have the 2600, which in this case is two specific line items. So that's the difference between having reports like that: checklist, check detail list, checklist with splits. Let's talk about the missing checks report and the missing invoice report. So there's a default report here on the reports menu and under banking called the missing checks. We go missing checks. And basically what this will give me is a continuation of checks, and it will kind of highlight every time a check number is skipped. Same thing goes with invoices. If I wanted to see if an invoice number is skipped, I start from this same missing checks report. I go to customize report, click on filter, and then I'll go to transaction type, and then instead of having it be a check, I would choose invoice. And then here under account, I'm going to go ahead and just select all, and then I hit OK. And basically that's going to give me every single time an invoice is skipped, right? So whatever research you have to do afterwards. See, in this case, they weren't even voided. They must have been duplicated or deleted. So in the case of duplicate invoice numbers, you can see them there. So that's the usefulness of that report. The next example is a retained earnings adjustment and audit trail. Okay, so this is a little bit of a tricky one. Okay, so for this one, I start with a balance sheet. And let me go ahead and start at the beginning of the year. So I kind of just want to focus on what retained earnings is at the beginning of the year. So we take that number, whatever that retained earnings amount is, 107,400. I'm going to take that number, and then I'm going to do a journal entry. So I'm going to go to company, make journal entry, and then I'll do 12/31/2018. Let's say that is the retained earnings locking that I want to do. And this is going to make a lot of sense once I finish, so I'll show you. So I'm going to go retain earnings, and I'm going to go ahead and take that away. So I'll put that, just copy that number over, and then I'll create another account. In this case, I called it RE, right? It's like another retained earnings account under equity. And all I'm doing is I'm moving the total retained earnings to a different retained earnings with the sole purpose that I can later on monitor if there has been a change to my numbers on the previous year. Okay, so what I mean by that is when I look at this report, if I see my retained earnings under RE with a number and I don't see retained earnings, then I know for a fact the numbers have not been changed. However, let's say, for example, somebody went in there and we went back to last year and created a random transaction that is going to affect those retained earnings. So let me go ahead and just create a random transaction, and let me just move them here so you can actually see the effect of that once I save it. So once, and I want to make sure, make this smaller here. Perfect. And I want to make sure that once I hit save on this check, that you're kind of focused on this retained earnings number. So I'm going to hit save and close. And then you'll see that the RE number, the one that I adjusted, is the same, but then something else appeared under the old retained earnings with a dollar amount. So basically what that tells you is that something was changed or modified after I created that adjustment. So typically what I would do is to be able to really quickly pinpoint what was changed and modified after that is I go back to my original journal entry and I'll take a look at my journal entry. There it is. And I'll click on Customize Report and I'll click on Last Entered Modified and hit OK. And then I take a look at when this was created and modified. So I just kind of focused on, what day of the year and time and everything else. When was this journal entry made? When was this journal entry modified? And then I can actually double click on this retained earnings number, right, which is, and I click on all and I see that there's no modifications made to my retained earnings. So if there is, I can actually monitor, if there's further modifications. However, what I'm really focused in is trying to pinpoint where that 600 came from. So I can use it in combination with an audit trail. So I can go into reports, accountant, and I can click on audit trail. And then basically under customize, I'll make this smaller here, under customize, under dates. So I'm looking for something that was changed or modified before that lock-in period where I made that adjustment. So I'm going to click there last fiscal year. And then they entered and modified, then I can actually choose the specific date where this was entered or modified. So let's say that was the actual specific date where it was modified, because I'll get to see it based on when I did that adjustment. And then I'll pick that date and then I'll pick this somewhere in the future. So basically I'm looking for any transactions that were dated last year. This is before I created that journal entry, that they were modified or changed after I made that journal entry. So then when I hit OK, I should be able to see a much smaller audit trail, and I'll be able to pinpoint which transaction possibly made that difference. And there's the $600 transaction. And the last three custom reporting techniques I want to show you are pulling up an invoice profitability whenever I have an inventory item sold. And then a real tricky one is, how do I pull an invoice profitability for when items are not sold, but they do have a cost component, and that's also for inventory. And the third one is for reporting on non-posting costs. So let me start with pulling up invoice profitability report whenever I have inventory sold. So let me start with a new invoice here, and then I'll just pick any customer at random. And I'll pick an inventory part. So I'm going to scroll down and do inventory part here, cabinet pulls, and then I'll sell 100 of these. And let's say I'm selling them for $25 each. Okay, just a quick invoice here. Now when I hit save, okay, and then I hit Control Y, okay, that's to a journal. That's going to give me, that would allow to give me the cost information on top of the sales information. So if actually I scroll here to the right, I can see my cost component in this case is $255 and my sales price is $2,500. However, nowhere here I can really just see what my profit is. So in order to see what my profit is, I would go to Customize Report and click on filters, and then I want to make sure that instead of showing all accounts, I'm showing income and cost of goods sold. So I'm looking for that particular, there it is, income and cost of goods sold. That way I'm just focused on displaying income and cost of goods sold, and then I hit OK. Okay, so that we're getting there. Okay, so we need one more component here, which is I go back to Customize Report, and then on the column here I'm going to look for balance, and then I click OK. And basically this is how you get your profitability. The profit on this particular invoice is 2,244. The other one is, what if I want to know the profitability of an invoice, but I am not really selling these inventory parts. I'm using them as materials, and what I'm selling is just labor. So let's pull an example of that. So let me pull up QuickBooks, and let me go ahead and pull up an invoice, and I'll create a new invoice. And then let's say that I'm selling strictly labor, that I'm just selling the service. I'm going to click on installation here, and this is going to be $1,000 installation. However, I want to include the cost of some of the components of some of the parts that I'm using, but I'm not going to charge them to my client. So I'm going to hit the item drop down here, and let's say I'm going to use some doorknobs, and then I'm also going to use some exterior doors and that sort of thing. So I'm going to use 3 of these and 4 of these. Now the trick behind it is I don't want to charge my client for it. So what I do is here where it says rate, I change that to 0, and here where it says rate, I change that to 0. So what that would do is avoid including the sales price of those components, but because they are being sold, the cost is going to be in there. So I'm going to go ahead and click on save, and then I press Control Y, same as the last example, and I'll hit on Customize Report, Filter, and then under Account, I'm looking for all income and cost of goods sold, same exact example as I used before, okay? And then I'm gonna go to Display and show that balance column, and then I'll click OK, and I'll just get rid of a couple of columns here. That way it's a lot easier to get to that end result that we're looking at there. So the end result we're looking at is this is my profit on this deal. In this case, well, in this case it's actually negative because you see that profit in this report is shown as negatives. So in this case, $314 of balance is a loss. So this is how I know that I'm actually losing in this deal. And you know, the only way to really know is through this report, because otherwise I would have had to actually take a look at what's the cost component of these items. So I would have to have gone into the actual item, not this way, but I'll hit Control L. I would have to have gone into each item and see, well, you know, my cost component is $300. So by selling 4 of these, that already moves me to $1,200 cost. So unfortunately, because the cost component is not really part of the invoice, and if you are selling it at 0, you will need that specific report to know. So that was actually a pretty cool example that we actually got a losing deal, a losing deal. Okay, the last one I want to talk about is reporting non-posting cost on invoices. So the purpose of this is that I want to record an expense on an invoice for the purpose of knowing my profit, but I don't really want it to affect my books in any way. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what I did. So when I go into my list menu and I went into my item list, I actually created 2 items. One item, it's a service. Okay, so that's very important. That one has to be a service. And I created it and I named it non-posting cost, and I have it going into the cost of goods sold account. And then the other item I created is actually a very similar one. So I'm going to go down. This one's going to be an other charge, and that's probably the most important component. You got to make both of them different. So one's a service, the other one's another charge. I call this one pretty similar. I just called it non-posting cost reversal. And then under the account, I put it to cost of goods sold. So what I do with this is I create an invoice, and let me just pick a random customer here, and I'll pick a service that I'm selling, installation. And then, like I mentioned before, this is not really something that I'm actually selling a product that I'm trying to know the cost of it. I'm just trying to register some non-posting expenses so then I can later on monitor the profit. So I would use those 2 items there, this one called non-posting cost, and then the other one that I called it non-posting cost reversal. And remember, the second item is an other charge, and the first item is a service. So I wanna add a non-posting cost of $375, and I'm gonna put that as negative, right? Because in an invoice, a positive is income and a negative would be like a cost. And then I'm gonna reverse it. Okay, so basically I'm still going to have $1,000 invoice, and then I'll show you how to hide those in a second. So I'm still going to have $1,000 invoice. So when I click on save and I hit Control Y, and then I go back to the same principles here, I go to customize report, filters, and I look for all income and cost of goods sold, right? We're working off the same concept here. However, in this particular case, and let me collapse this particular case, the positive and the negative are both going to show. And the only way to filter it out is now using item filter. So because the, the the items that I'm selling are service and the items that I'm including as a non-posting cost are service, what I can do is I can go into item here and I will filter it so it only shows services. So in this case, it's going to filter out the other charge, and then I'll be able to know what, and I just have to make sure that I add that last one because that's the one that calculates my profit. And then by doing that, I can actually see that my quasi profit, right, the one that I'm just trying to calculate, it's 625. So that's just kind of a way for you to do that. Now, unfortunately, if I do this and then I go print this invoice and show it to my customer may be very confused about this non-posting cost. So the way to solve this is to create a new item that is a group, and then we'll call this internal cost. And then using this group for internal cost, then I just have to recall those two items that I used as the example here. So I'm going to pick each one, and one I put it as a positive and the other one as a negative, and that's kind of how they will net out to zero. So I'm going to put this one quantity 1, and this one, actually this the cost component will be -1 and the other one will be +1, and then I hit OK. And I can go ahead and just get rid of these two, that way they're not showing anymore. Okay, and then in here inside the group itself, then I can put the -375 and the +375. That is going to, in this case, net out to, in this case, it should net out to 0. Actually, this should be 375. That's already the -1. It's already driving that, so I don't need to put a negative there. So that will drive that to 0. When I do a print preview, you will see that that line doesn't show up at all. It just kind of shows that 0 there. That's kind of the beauty of groups. And when I hit save, and again, I pull the profitability report by hitting Control Y and then going into customize, and then I gotta pull up the balance filter, and then I go to account and I go to all income and cost of goods sold. And I think we beat this one, this dead horse, pretty deeply. So it should be pretty obvious by now that I really like this style of custom reporting. So by doing that last one, then I get to see it. So this is basically, in a nutshell, one of my favorite custom reports to build, which is using the inner workings of an invoice and the items to create reports that you couldn't pull in any other way.
And so what I'm going to be talking about is QBO. And keep in mind that in QuickBooks Desktop, there's over like 120 some reports. I don't know what the final number is, but there's way more reports that are available in QuickBooks Desktop than there are in QuickBooks Online. But there's still a lot that we can do in QBO, and there's a few things that we can do in QBO that you can't do in QuickBooks Desktop. So first of all, I want to give you just a quick review of the facts, so just some basic customization that you can do: the monthly P&L, the multi-year P&L or balance sheet. Just quickly review the management reports because we've mentioned those previously, and then the QuickBooks Labs that's available. So let me go on into QuickBooks real quickly. Let me get into, let me go back into QuickBooks. I'll get the right one here in a minute. I have too many files open. So just real quickly, I wanted to remind you, if you want to do a multi-month statement, like for example the P&L by month, all you need to do is come in here under your P&L and you click on that customize button, and just like Hector was showing you how you can change the period, you're going to want to do that with QBO as well, where you're going to click to change the columns to monthly. So just real quickly, you could come in there and create your monthly P&L. So you've got it by month. Or let's say you wanted to do a multi-year. Maybe I want to go from 2012 through 2015. Well, what you can do there is you can change your dates, and then, oops, I need to change it by year because I don't want it all these months. So you change your columns by year. Now we should have a multi-year, like a 3-year or a 5-year P&L. You can do the same thing on your balance sheet. So you change the dates, the from and to, and then you also change those columns to be by year, so you can get a multi-year report quickly and easily. Then also, we've covered this previously, so I just want to mention it so that you remember that it's out there, the management reports. This was new several months ago, but these are very nice and pretty reports for us. So you can not only use the reports that are already out there, the standard reports, but you can edit those and customize those as well. These are nice, pretty PDF reports with a cover page with the table of contents. You can have preliminary pages in there if you need to put the accountant's compilation report or some disclaimer information. You've got those in there. Then when we get to reports, notice how we have the P&L on the balance sheet, but this is where the customization comes in. I can add new reports to this. Perhaps I want to put in here the AR aging or the AP aging, detail or summary. You can choose additional reports to add in there. When you do this, it will automatically update your table of contents for you. And then you can also have some end notes. So I just wanted to remind you, like I mentioned, we've covered the management reports previously, but I know some of you haven't attended every single webinar that we've done. I wish you would, but that's available in the archives. So you can go to the QB Power Hour archives and you can watch that there. Another quick thing that I wanted to point out to you is that Intuit is working on updates for QBO all the time. Remember, every month we have new updates come out under something called QuickBooks Labs. See in the settings where you have QuickBooks Labs, they are working on QuickBooks reports, and they're fixing it to where you can do some filtering and things like that. So if you come out here and check out the QuickBooks Labs, you'll see the section on reports. I don't see it now. It was there 5 minutes ago. There it is, redesigned reports. I just saw it and bypassed it. Anyway, you can come out here and turn on this redesigned reports. So once you turn this feature on in QuickBooks Labs, now I can go, and let me just show you real quickly one of the things that you're going to see from that. If I go back over to my reports, whoops, I didn't want to go back to there. Close that. I want to go back into my reports and show you a profit and loss. My internet's choosing to be slow today. Come on. Oh, I'm in my reports. Duh. I'm having a bad day, I'll tell you. Technology is not my friend today. Lately, it's been causing me trouble. So out here, it still does not look like it's turned on. So let's try it once before. Try out the newly designed. Yeah, it's not working. That's one of the problems with these reports in the labs. But what it allows you to do is to collapse and expand certain sections on your profit and loss. So instead of getting rid of all the sub-accounts, you can get rid of just some of the sub-accounts instead of all of them. Let me see if it's up in this Alvarez books or not. But that's one of the things with QuickBooks Labs is it's in the beta testing stage. But yeah, it's working in this file. It just didn't work in the company that I was in over there. That was the sample company. But see the little upside down arrow? That allows you to collapse and expand just certain sections of the report. Instead of all or nothing, you're getting that. So, and you can then also collapse all of it, change how you sort. You can add some notes in here. So check out some of the stuff in QuickBooks Labs, and you can see you've got some more filtering and things like that. Check out some of the cool things that they're doing there and working on, and give them your feedback. Now, let's talk about some other customizing of reports. One of the things that I'll hear people say, and this is a list of them just for the PowerPoint. I'm going to go into QBO and show you, but a lot of times people will say, how can I get a cash receipts report? How can I get my cash disbursements journal? Where are those reports? There's no report called that. You're right, there's no canned report that says cash receipts or cash disbursements journal, but if you quickly go into transactions, I'll go into sales, and in the sales transactions, what I can do is I can filter this. Let's say I want to see everything for last month. And I can say for last month, I want to see all the money received. Sounds like cash receipts to me. So I can do this based on last month. You'll notice it will pull payments. It'll pull my sales receipts. Why is it pulling expenses? That's interesting. Usually it doesn't pull expense forms there, so maybe something's not working. But this typically would show you all the money that you've received. That's kind of interesting why that's showing up there. I'm curious. I'm going to click on it and look at it. You never know what you're going to get sometimes when you're in these sample company files. It is a U.S. bank credit card, but that should be a payment, so that should be a cash disbursement. I apologize. This is the playground where we get in here and we do crazy things. It's not real clients, and it's also not the sample company file, so sometimes you don't know what you're going to get, and this definitely doesn't look right. This isn't what I usually see, but you get the idea of how you can filter for money received and specify a specific period. You can do the same thing when it comes to your expenses. And you can filter for, if you click on all the transactions type, we don't want all transactions. We would like to look at recently paid. But you could go through here and you could choose checks if you just wanted to get a list of the checks that were written in the last month. But if you do recently paid, you could go ahead and apply that filter there. And the nice thing about these reports is it gives you a total at the bottom of them as well. So although it's not called cash receipts and cash disbursements, you can definitely create these reports. And then over here on the upper right, you could print this report, or you could export this to Excel and manipulate it over there if you want to. So that's some of the good things that you could do there. Now let's look at another one under the chart of accounts, under the check register. You can also come out here, because some people say, I want to be able to print my check register. Well, they've recently enhanced and made changes and updates to the check register. So what you can do out here in this check register, let's say you wanted to look at all of your unreconciled transactions and get a report of that. You can click on this to filter, and under the reconciled status, I could go ahead and look at all these transactions if I wanted to just print my check register for the past month. But maybe I just want to look at my outstanding or not reconciled transactions. And let's change this to everything. Maybe I want to see all of my outstanding transactions. And then you can just click on apply. And you would get that list there of all your unreconciled. So these are, again, some things that you can do that you just may not be aware of, because there's a lot of reports that you can kind of get and customize without going through the report center. For example, if I want a quick list of all my overdue invoices, I can quickly go to my customer center, click on overdue. I've got this list, and then you can always, over here to the right, print or export to Excel. So you're able to get quick reports in places other than the report center. But the report center is where we have lots and lots of different reports out there. For example, one of the questions that somebody wanted to be able to see was an estimate by customer and the status of that. So it's easy to do that. If you go under sales, where you can review sales, you can come in here and see where it says estimates by customer. And so you can come out here, you can see your estimate by customer quickly and easily, and you can see the status, whether it's closed or accepted. Now, you can't do sales orders with QuickBooks Online, but one of the things that you can do is use the estimates to track that status. So what I could do is, let's say I want to use my estimate as a sales order. I can change the status to accepted. Then when I come out here, I can customize, and you know, Hector mentioned that in desktop it's called filter, but you can customize or filter by list or by status out here. So I could look for just particular customers if I wanted to, kind of filtering by a customer, or the status. If I want to just look at those estimates that have been accepted, but they haven't been closed yet, they haven't been fulfilled. So what we're trying to do here is use estimates as sales orders. And we want to know which orders do we have that we need to send over to shipping that need to be fulfilled, so we can look at all of our accepted estimates. And we can run that report and just see those that have been accepted. Now, some of you may not have noticed this. Let me go ahead and go over here to another tab. Let's just bring up an estimate quickly and show you. On the estimate screen, up here in the upper left corner is where, and this is not normal, it doesn't normally take that long, where you can change the status of an estimate from pending to accepted. That is a way of turning it into a sales order that you can get a report to send off to the shipping or the department that you need to. So you can kind of do that. Another thing that you can do with QuickBooks Online is, in QuickBooks Online, you can have multiple budgets. Now, I know Hector was just talking about, you know, budget versus actual and all that. What we can do in QuickBooks Online is we can create multiple budgets. So I could create a budget by customer. Then you can use that budget versus actual report to get an estimates versus actual report. So there's lots of different things that you can do out here in QuickBooks Online. One of the things that I hear a lot of people say is, if I come out under business overview, I don't see the budget reports, the budget overview or the budget actual. How come I don't see those reports? You actually have to create that budget in order to have that report out there. So you would want to come up here under that gear, and you can go in there and go into budgeting. And again, you can create multiple budgets. So I can budget by class, I can budget by customer, I can budget by location, if you've got those things turned on. And so you go out and you create a budget, you give it a name, and see, this is where you can have multiple budgets. And then you can use that to get, if you will, an estimates versus actual report. So there's lots of different things that you can do that are a little bit different. One of the other things that I think is really amazing in QuickBooks Online versus desktop is the audit log. Let's go in and let's change a transaction here. So I'm going to pull this up and let's look up, here's an expense, $5,000 to AT&T. So I'm going to go to this $5,000 to AT&T. Let's change it from telephone expense to travel and meals. And let's also change the amount to just $50. So let's make these changes. And I'm going to go ahead and click Save and Close down here. Now let's go look at the audit log, because I want to show you how amazing this is, especially when you need to filter and find things and see what happened and who changed it and all that. So under the audit log, it will show every little thing that anybody did. If you'll notice under filter, you can see when people sign in, when they sign out. Did they create a budget? Did they set up a recurring template? Did they change the settings? Did they reconcile? What about entering transactions? And you can look and filter down there for deleted and voided transactions. There's actually a report for us when we log in as the accountant's user, so you don't even have to do that. Did they make list changes? Did they add a new customer? Did they edit a vendor? Statements, customizations, data exchange with third-party apps. You can see every little thing out here easily by user. So you can see there's lots of different users out here. You can see there's a lot of us in here that play around with this file. That's why sometimes we get unexpected results, because it's a sample company that we all play around in. But you can see and filter specifically for who did it, what dates did they do it, and see exactly not only what it is you're looking for, but what changed. So here at the top, it says somebody edited an expense. And so I can see this, but if I click on the history under View, I can see here's where it was first added, here's where it was edited. So I can see it's highlighted. Okay, so these are the fields that changed. I wonder what it was before, because this isn't right. I need to put it back where it was supposed to be. If you click on Compare, you can easily see on the left-hand column here what it was before, in this case $5,000, and on the right-hand column, what was it after, $50. And I can click on Show the Changes Only. So at a glance, I can see, again, it used to be telephone expense right here, and it was changed to travel and meals. It will highlight, it will show you who changed it, when they changed it, what was it before, and what is it now. So it is so easy to go down and see, who did it, when they did it, and all that stuff. Now, one of the things that I find interesting is sometimes your client will say, no, I did not do that. I didn't do it. And then you're like, yes, you did. You did it yesterday at 11:52 a.m. Because it tells you, 11:50 a.m. is when this change was made and who did it, so you know specifically. So great reports that are available in QuickBooks Online, and the audit log is one that's way better than in the QuickBooks Desktop. It's a lot harder to filter and find things and to see things like that in QuickBooks Desktop. And in QuickBooks Desktop, you can't see like when people log in or log out, when they make changes to lists or settings or any of those other things. Now, one of the other things, somebody had asked a question in the window about reports and getting them to your clients. With QuickBooks Desktop, you can export a report template and import it. Of course, that doesn't save the custom settings, which somebody mentioned. If you have specific filters or custom fields, that's not going to work for you. But in QuickBooks Online, if you want to share custom reports with other companies, I'm going to show you what you can do. And then also I wanted to remind you about the deposits recorded as income. So let me go back into QuickBooks Online quickly. And the trick for sharing these things, let's say that I've got a report that I love, like this estimates by customer. This would be my sales orders. I would want to change the headings, just like Hector had mentioned, having a good title. So I may want to change this to open sales orders. Remember, we were using our estimates to look and see which were kind of like sales orders that have been accepted but not yet fulfilled. So I can change my title and all that, and then I can save that customization. So you can give it a name, you can save the customization, you can share this with all of your company users. So it's quick and easy to share this report with your other users. So in Desktop, you would have to export the template, then they import the template. But in QuickBooks Online, I can just click, share this report with all the company users and say okay. And if it's one of the reports that you use a lot and you want to have it readily available, just go ahead and bookmark that. And let's call it open sales orders. Whoops. Orders. And then you have that on your one-click icon bar up here, where you can very quickly and easily just open that with one click and have that report available to you without going into the reports and the saved reports and all that stuff. So there is some reporting flexibility with QuickBooks Online. You also can set them up to automatically be emailed. We've talked about that before and how I love that feature where it will automatically send them to yourself or to your clients whatever date you specify. But QuickBooks Online is still limited and not as robust as QuickBooks Desktop.
Okay, perfect. All right. So if we don't get Michelle back, then I'm going to go ahead and just jump in and take care of the rest of the webinar. So next week, we will have Spotlight Reporting as our feature app. We'll be talking about Spotlight Reporting for the whole hour. They're going to show us 4 major sections or modules that Spotlight Reporting has. They have custom management reports, custom budgets, easy dashboards, and using non-financial data combined with actual QuickBooks data to create specific types of reports. So one of the important themes to just keep in mind here is that both QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online, they both have limitations of what reports can do. And unfortunately, you're going to have to work with third parties to be able to do some of these things. Okay, all right, so like I was saying, next week we'll have Spotlight Reporting. We'll talk about those 4 major features: custom management reports, custom budgets, easy dashboards, and using non-financial information. Custom management reports in Spotlight Reporting look like this. They're beautiful looking. You can summarize certain points of information. So I strongly recommend that if you're looking for a much stronger reporting tool, to use that. And this is what the easy dashboards option looks like. Again, we're going to spend the whole hour next week demonstrating all these tools. So I encourage you to go to Facebook and search QB Power Hour. Ask any further questions you have there about reports. We'll do some research. We'll answer those questions. Let me go ahead and close the polling question. For next week, just test out Spotlight Reporting. Give it a shot. Go to spotlightreporting.com, www.spotlightreporting.com. You can set up a free trial, connect your QBO account, try it for yourself. And then when you come next week to the next webinar, come load it with the questions, right? Because we're gonna have the people from Spotlight doing a demonstration here. For next couple of episodes, mark your calendars. We're gonna have next week Spotlight Reporting. Then a week later, we'll have nonprofits for QuickBooks. This is gonna be one of the most popular episodes because we've had tons of requests for nonprofits. Then on the 15th, we'll have client onboarding, project management, and engagement letters, and we'll have Practice Ignition as a guest speaker. On the 29th, one of the tentative topics is to do AR management on November 12th, we don't have a topic yet. November 19th, we don't have a topic. All we know is that it's live in Las Vegas. And on December 3rd, we don't have a topic either. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to be doing another webinar exactly in like 30 minutes through the QuickBooks VCon on payroll. So if you're interested, go to quickbooksvcon.com, register, and in about 30 minutes at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, we'll be doing a payroll webinar. Michelle, any last words?
No, just not sure what we had wrong with the technical problems, but post your question in Facebook group. QB Power Hour is the Facebook group, and we'll see you all later. Bye, everybody.
Bye.